is Karma calling, and you better wake the up.
Welcome back to the podcast, Karma is Calling. I'm your host, Lauren, and today we got a solo episode for you guys. I'm really excited for this episode because I actually feel confident. And that is so much inner work that I have done to be on here feeling confident. So I'm really proud of myself. But honestly, I've been avoiding solo episodes since I've launched this podcast. Being solo, I was just like my worst critic, that people wouldn't like what I have to say or I'd embarrass myself, all those thoughts that kept me really stagnant and in the same spot. And that it was kind of my comfort zone to have people on here to feed ideas off of, bounce off of, right? And I obviously am going to continue to do interviews. I love interviews and I love when Charles is here. But I knew that it was time for me to be vulnerable and to share my voice, because in astrology, Black Moon Lilith, the point of our chart is like our deep repressed fears is in Gemini, my voice. So I thought, you know what? It's time. And why else I'm doing it is I was listening to this lady talk about the chakra systems. And she's talking about the solar plex and how, that's our identity, that's our self-confidence. And the way we strengthen that is putting yourself out there in this world, showing people who you are, showing your people your light and how you shine. And so again, I was like, all right, all signs are leading. It's time for a solo episode. And Lord, do I have stuff to share? If you listen to my last podcast, you know I'm pregnant. And so in this episode specifically, I really want to focus and highlight the journey of my spirituality over the last year, how the hardships of my miscarriages have led me to where I am today, how much more ready I am to be pregnant right now. I'm going to talk about the first trimester, how difficult that was on an anxiety level, on an intrusive thought level, on an exhaustion level, and how I feel like nature does that on purpose, on a spiritual lens, once again, with the feminine and masculine energies. We're going to dive into that. And then at the very end of the episode, I am going to give some updates on astrology. There's a lot coming down the pipe with energy over the next few months until the end of the year. And I just really want to highlight that. And so we can kind of keep up to date with things in the media and things happening, so you guys are prepared as well. So what's crazy is I was just sitting here thinking about it. Literally exactly a year ago is when this all began. My first pregnancy was at the end of May last year. At that time, I did not know that that was a catalyst into my own spiritual journey, Charles's spiritual journey, to lead us to where we are now. But the first pregnancy in and itself taught me the lesson of learning to trust the hardships. And that when you have a hardship, when you go through trauma, when you go through something really difficult, if you can move through it, don't escape it, don't avoid it, don't ignore it. If you can face it head on and move through the pain, move through that experience, is when you alchemize it into power. And that is what I learned from this experience. So basically, I don't really remember how much I've shared about this, but basically I got pregnant accidentally because I got my IUD removed and whoops, didn't know you weren't supposed to have sex before then. And we were not in a financial or an emotional state for that. We were about to get married like 3 months later. He was unemployed. We were basically going broke, right? Like it just was not the time. We lived in a house with mold and rats. But when we found out I was pregnant, a full just experience came over me and was like, I will do anything and everything to make sure that this baby lives a healthy life. And part of that was moving. We knew that we needed to move out of Seattle into more of a homey environment, into a more slow-paced environment of the values that we want to raise our kid around. And so I just had this voice in my head that said Vancouver, Washington. Never once in my life have I looked at Vancouver. I've never even been to Vancouver, but I just Googled it. I followed that voice. And the house we live in now popped up. And I was like, this is beautiful. I sent it to Charles. He's like, what the hell? I want to live there. Like, where is that? And so we booked a tour. And I was only pregnant for about a week. Okay. So this happened in the beginning of that week. We're really fast movers here. We schedule a tour. Now, 24 hours before that tour is when I started spotting. And the doctor was like, oh, we don't really know if it's a miscarriage yet. It's just spotting. It could be normal. Just like hang in there. And I was like, okay. But I kind of knew something was off, right? Well, my sign with the universe is butterflies. So when a butterfly comes to me, I know that I need to be paying attention to something. And as the day went on, butterflies like kept coming to me at my window. And I was like, okay, I trust that whatever's happening is meant to be. And I talked to Charles, like, do you think we should cancel the tour? Like, we're not going to have the kids. Like, I think I'm miscarrying. And he was like, no, like, let's just go. Let's just see what it's about. And so I said, okay. So we did one quick walk with our dog beforehand, and a butterfly came and landed on a tree in front of us, and a bald eagle was swarming us. And it just felt so magical. Like, you're on the right path. Just keep going forward. So we went down to Vancouver, toured the house we're at. A butterfly came to us on our patio, and we were hooked. We were in love, but there were so many barriers. Like, we still had a lease till July. He was unemployed, so we didn't have enough money to qualify for the house. And so we were just like, there's no fucking way. So I literally ignored the leasing agent's text of like, what do you think? Because it was like a self-guided tour. I ignored it. And then she called me, and I didn't know it was her. So I answered, and I was like, we can't move in the next 2 weeks when it's available. Like, I don't think it's going to work out. And she was like, oh no, we'll hold it for 45 days. And I was like, wait, what? And then she was like, just send over everything. We'll get you qualified and just put your deposit down. Well, then we realized, we didn't have enough money. And she was like, well, do you have a offer letter? Which he had. He was going to work at the winery all summer. And we're like, oh my God, he hadn't started it yet. So all the barriers just really were taken away. And we just knew that moment, like, this is our spirit baby saying, you have to go. Trust yourself, trust the process. And we thought maybe we need to move down here, and that's where we need to start the family. So we signed that lease, and ever since that day, doors have been opening up. He ended up getting this amazing job he loves. My career has exploded. And we know it was because we trusted the process and we got new energy in our lives. And so remember that when you're going through hard times and you're being guided, just go for it. If you don't even know why, but it's the right thing to do, trust yourself. And it was really cool because, we were going to get married, or we were getting married in that September. And so from July to September, we moved to a new space with minimal friends, and we were just together. And we had this really amazing few months of just getting ready to be married to one another, consciously talking about what that meant for us, talking about how marriage is a sacred union and that we are merging into one soul, and why divorce is real. And people talk about it. We would tell people, oh my God, we're so scared to get married. Like, it's forever. This is crazy and daunting. People are like, it doesn't have to be forever. And we're like, no, it is, like, that is the purpose of marriage for us. And so it was just a really magical time to kind of move away from everything we know, our comfort zone, to lean on one another before we went into this pivotal time in our life. Again, it just felt right. And so, of course, we got married, we went on our honeymoon. And at this point, I just wanted a kid, right? Like, after I got pregnant, I was like, oh my God, put a baby in me now, which is funny. Because before I got married, I was like, I want to wait 2 years. I want to travel, blah, blah, blah. When you think you plan your life out and then that just goes out the window. I was like, no, I'm ready. And he was always ready. So we started trying. And I think that this next pregnancy was just a little bit harder because we wanted it so badly. So there was a little bit more of an attachment to it. Well, there was a lot more of an attachment to it. And basically what happened was, I made it to 6.5, 7 weeks. And this was the lesson of you can't control shit, right? Like, we think we control things in our lives, but that's the ego. You don't actually control anything. Our soul has a plan, spirit has a plan, but we like to think we do. And it's fine that it's a defense mechanism, it's a coping mechanism, but this taught me that you actually don't. And from my perspective, it was really needed because I had to lean so far into my spirituality, not to spiritually bypass my miscarriage and the feelings of grief, but to move through them. Charles was my mirror in that moment of like, what do you believe? How can you lean into that? How can you trust right now that there's a timeline, and when the baby's ready, when we're ready, it will come. And that brought him closer to his spirituality. It brought us closer as a couple, but it really did let me just have full acceptance. And it's really funny because I'm not someone to shy away from talking, like, I'll share about my experience. And I would tell people what I was going through, and everyone would get really uncomfortable. And I'd be like, no, like, I want to talk about it. It's okay. It's okay to talk about grief. It's okay to talk about the hard times. And so it was really cool just to kind of incorporate and share how much these miscarriages have changed us on a soul level and how spiritual they actually were for us. And when we actually got pregnant, it was so magical. And that's why I want to tell my conception story, because I've been working with spirit for about 4 years, 5 years now. And I don't tell a lot of my magical stories because they're really personal. And I know a lot of people don't really believe it, or they're just like, oh, whatever. So, I just do my own thing. But I feel like it's time to share the magic of the universe so more people can feel like they can be connected in that way. Because when you live a life in alignment and when you're grounded in whatever your spiritual practice is, and you understand that there's magic happening around us at all times and that spirit is sending us signs at all times, it's such a fun life to live. You're in awe constantly. And so I miscarried December through January, and then my birthday is February 12th. And every year I get a reading from an intuitive, a psychic. And I've been going to the same person, Kiki. Their name is Opulent Witch. Highly recommend. And this reading was so powerful. So it was Wednesday. And she opens the reading and she was like, oh my gosh, so beautiful. You have so many midwives and doulas around you. And I just thought it was for what I was going through. And I thought that was really special that the other side was like supporting me and holding me through this time. And she was like, whoa, your spirit baby's present, which I was so excited about. And she started to say what she was seeing from the spirit baby. And so this is where it gets really odd. So basically, if you don't know what a spirit baby is, let me just back up there. A spirit baby is your spirit soul on the other side before it incarnates, right? A lot of us have contracts with souls, and they kind of, when they're ready to come into your consciousness or into earth, they'll start orbiting you. They want to get to know your life. They want to get to know, your partner. Either like you have a spirit baby, your partner has a spirit baby, or you create one together. There are mediums that can channel them. So actually in June, I'm doing an actual baby intuitive reading, and I'm so excited to share about that. But so psychics can channel them when they come through. And so she said, okay, your baby's here. And she described that my baby was sharing with her that Charles and I have traveled many lives with this soul, and that this soul is from a universe that I currently channel from. And what channeling is how you take cosmic intelligence, how you take spiritual messages, I guess, divine wisdom through you as a human, and you channel it and then you share it, right? So biblical texts are channeled, human design was channeled, psychics channel and readings. And I was told then a week later by another psychic, which is, I'll get to the story, that I channel this specific entity that this baby was talking about. And so Kiki was telling me, like, you're from this universe, and she almost looks like an angel, but it's not an angel. It's just like a being. And when I come down to earth, I have a mission, and Charles and you need to be ready. And if I came too soon, Charles would have been cracked open. I don't know what that means, but I could imagine as I watched him evolve that he needed to be like ready to have a child and not to program them out of their special being, their special powers. And it just said that, and then it said that me as the mother, I need to release fear that I can't handle my job and career and the baby. Now, I have not told anyone that this was deep down something I was really scared about, because I think it's a big topic that a lot of women hold. Like, can I be a mom and have a career? How am I going to balance that, right? It's a huge thing in today's age, and a huge thing with women actually having to work when maybe they don't want to work just because of the economy. It's just such a big topic that I was holding a lot of fear in my body around that. And the baby was like, you need to release that and understand that when I come to you, it will be in the divine time, and more abundance than you can imagine is going to come. So you don't need to stress about that. And I just thought it was a really beautiful moment because Kiki obviously didn't know I was holding that fear. And just to hear that from the spirit of like, girl, you're going to be okay when I'm here. Just like let it vibe, let it flow, just felt so empowering. So I had that reading on Wednesday. I'm telling Charles about it. He's like, I want a reading. And I was like, okay, cool. So I booked him a reading for a week later. Well, that weekend was the new moon in Aquarius. And we did the deed on the new moon, unintentional. Okay. Like I knew I was ovulating, but I wasn't tracking temperature. I wasn't tracking any of that. We just had it, had sex. And it was really interesting because the fifth house is the children house in my birth chart. So the fifth house is ruled by Aquarius. New moons are new beginnings. And so that seed was planted on that day. Well, Monday was my actual birthday. So that was Saturday. Monday was my birthday. And I already had this energy cleansing session set up. I was saying, okay, it's the year of my Saturn return. I've had 2 miscarriages. I'm going to do all the readings to prep me for this year. I know this year is going to be a big one. So I went to Amy. Their business is called Temple Medicine. And she is an energy cleanser. She's done a lot of shamanic training and things like that. And so I hadn't seen her in 2 years. And I just told her, I need to see what comes up in this reading. It was a 2-hour in-person session, and nothing about the miscarriage came up at all. A lot about past life wounding around my psychic abilities, which was cool. I was like, sweet, whatever needs to come, needs to come. And at the very end, she goes, oh my gosh, can I clear your womb space? And I said, of course. And so she walked me through this exercise, and she said, I want you to bring your third eye, kind of imagine it going all the way down into your womb. And she goes, on the left side, I want you to imagine like a slide or a staircase and go down and picture the divine feminine. And what I saw was like this big, like Medusa woman just engulfing me in this empowering energy. It was full body chills. And she said, bring her up. And she like came up my body, engulfed my whole aura being from my head to my toe, and came back up and just settled in my heart space. It was like I was on like getting electrocuted. It was crazy. And she goes, okay, go back down and do that to the right side, but with the masculine energy. And I was like, okay. And so it was so crazy. The masculine energy like bowed to me. It was like, sup. And it was very calm and it was very chill, way less powerful than the feminine. Interesting. And so I brought him up, or it up, the energy up, and I let it engulf my body. It wasn't as strong. It was actually very peaceful, and it settled back into my womb. And then she goes, I want you to imagine these two energies coming together. And all of a sudden, I had this pressure point at my tailbone. It was like light pumping through my tailbone. And then I saw this two energies coming together, like spinning together to create this rainbow right out of my right out of my sacral chakra, which is where your baby grows. She's like, what are you seeing? And I was like, I'm seeing this spiral come out of me of energy. And it was just beautiful. And she's like, that's your Kundalini energy. So if you don't know what Kundalini is, it's basically this life force energy, this Christ consciousness energy that sits at your bottom of your spine until it's awakened. It's this oil that will go through your spine and it kind of wakes you up. Sometimes you can have like negative effects. You can get sick. You can feel really off, all these things. I didn't. I was just shocked that I was going through this experience. And when I got home, I opened Instagram and it's this video of these two silver snakes swimming together. And all of a sudden they start spiraling together, creating this rainbow color, and the caption's Kundalini power. I was shook AF and I was like, oh my God, spirit, like validation right there. Cause I was doubting myself. You know, a lot of times when you have these spiritual experiences, you think, am I just making that up? But no, nothing is a coincidence. And so I had that experience. And again, at this point, did not know that I was going to be pregnant. And so looking back now, I really, really believe that that was the moment that my body, the sperm and the egg, came together, because it can take up to 5 days. And we had sex on that Saturday, and that was Monday. And then on Wednesday, we went to Kiki because Charles really wanted a reading, and he did an individual reading, and then we did a couple relationship reading. And the first card that she flipped was a tarot reading, an Empress, which is fertility, pregnancy. And right then I kind of felt like, okay, maybe I'm pregnant, but I didn't know. And I promised Charles that I would not test until my app told me to, my fertility app, because I kind of had a problem with testing like really early because I was so impatient and I wanted to know if I was pregnant, that I was wasting a lot of pregnancy tests, which was not good for a bank account and not good for the environment. So I was like, fine, I will not test until it tells me to. And I was so impatient, but lo and behold, on the full moon in Virgo, it told me to test and I was pregnant. And just like having that connection to my baby the few days leading up to conception and to release just any control and totally being like, it will happen when it happens. And then it happening that weekend. And then having this Kundalini experience of cleansing out my womb space so that it can grow there and be healthy is just so magical. And I will never forget that. And I have never made it past 6.5 weeks pregnant. So, where my other pregnancies, I was so tired, but I wasn't, filling my body. I was smoking weed a lot. At this point, for the third pregnancy, I was completely sober. I was on all the prenatals I needed to be. I was eating super healthy because I really want it to be viable, right? So I was planning for pregnancy before I actually got pregnant. So I felt really good for the most part, which is why I was kind of surprised I was pregnant because I didn't feel the symptoms I did previously. And I was feeling really good and I was pushing myself in work and my business was growing. But the moment I got pregnant, fear really crept in because of those 2 miscarriages, right? It was just this constant, every time I felt something in my body, I was like, oh my God, am I miscarrying? Is it still in there? And to this day, I still have to think like, are you still in there? Is your heart still beating? And that's really from the trauma from my miscarriages. And as much as I've tried to release that, it's still definitely present. And my heart goes out to moms who go through multiple in a row. And it's just really hard. And so I had that anxiety. Well, that anxiety started to fuel other anxieties. Okay. So I started getting really tired, but it wasn't just the exhaustion that overtook me. It was these negative thoughts I started having because I worked so hard for my business and I just could not create content anymore. I didn't want to post on TikTok, but my TikTok was growing. It was like not the time to stop posting, but I was forcing myself to do it. I was so tired. I felt like a failure. And these thoughts were just spiraling because of the program around productivity. But what I was really actually learning in this moment was masculine energy versus feminine energy, the law of gender. Masculine energy at its core is the energy that we go and take action with. Okay. It's the protector, it's the one that wants to get things done, the doer. Where the feminine energy is the being, it's the creator. It wants to be grounded and to be still and to create. And then masculine takes whatever you create and put it out there, right? Well, when you're pregnant, you are so in your feminine. And because I was such a masculine human, the person always driving things forward, forcing things, when my body said, no more, you have to be all in your feminine, it was really hard for me. And my passion, I felt like, was gone. And I felt like I didn't know if I was ever going to get anything back. And that was really scary. My midwife was like, it will be back in the second trimester, just trust. And it is. But I started to have some intrusive thoughts around what would it be like when my kid came and if I was going to be a good mom and if I was going to hurt my baby, a lot of thoughts that I'm hear about in postpartum. And I was in a doula group taking courses and they talk a lot about the 4th trimester and the hormonal changes and how your body wants to do anything in its power to protect that baby, that it will start telling you the weirdest thoughts of how your baby's being harmed, even though it's not, right? They're intrusive. So I was experiencing that in my first trimester, which was really scary for me and also kind of scared me for postpartum. But luckily I had this education and I could separate what intrusive thoughts were to who I actually am. Right? Because when people don't realize what intrusive thoughts are, especially induced by hormones or medication, a lot of times when people go on new medications, suicidal thoughts, those kind of things can increase as well. You don't realize that they're just hormones, because hormones are emotions and thoughts that run our software of our body. They're not you. And so don't attach, don't be shameful for those thoughts. They're real. Talk about them so people can tell you like those are just thoughts and can validate that, right? So it was just a really hard first trimester. However, I realized, and I've done so much reflection on, that's the initiation into being a mother, into being the feminine, because when the baby's here, you have to slow down. And so I find it really cool that we have 9 months to go through all of these changes. Why, yes, the baby needs to physically be ready, but so do the parents. We have to emotionally be ready. And I know that the next step is getting through the 3rd trimester. I mean, the 2nd trimester, I'm feeling so good, but then it's the 3rd, and then it's birth, which is a whole gauntlet in itself, which is where I'm at right now, really preparing, because we as women have been taught to lose our own agency within the birthing system, within the medical system. We're taught that birth is a medical thing. It's not, it's nature, right? women have been birthing for millennials before hospitals. But what we hear and what we see is how painful and traumatic birth is, which for many women, that is their reality. And so I'm really working with myself to deprogram these fears. And I'm just so excited to have some doulas on here. I have two that are going to be on here talking about fertility, talking about conscious conception, but talking about birth and how we as women can gain our power back from it. And then also talking about postpartum. So I'm so excited to get into that when the time is ready. And to just share, how I've been prepping. And then obviously I'm going to share my labor and delivery story on here. And so, yeah, I think that the biggest thing was just moving through these anxieties and fears and trusting the process. And it's just funny because when I think back to every single miscarriage and pregnancy, the theme is to trust, to let go of control, to trust the process, to lean into the pain, and to just allow whatever to happen. And my Saturn in my birth chart is in Pisces, which means it's my karmic duty to learn how to trust. Pisces is the divine trust. I'm going through my Saturn return. The lessons I need to be learning and maturing in right now are my spiritual lessons around divine trusting. So it all makes sense, of course, it always does. And how I've used astrology through this is when you're pregnant, you're the most creative you will ever be. And during your fourth trimester, when the baby comes, you're the most creative, right? You are literally channeling spirit and creating another human being in your body. And I've had so many amazing ideas of how I'm going to morph and change my business and grow. And it really is actually reflecting my birth chart more than I've ever had anything reflect my birth chart. And so I've just leaned into that. I'm a Cancer moon. I'm meant to be a mother, but it's in my 10th house of career, talking about motherhood, experiencing motherhood. These are all things that are really going to actually help me in my career. And so the moment that I finally just relinquished control and stopped forcing myself to create and just be, I have felt so good. And I feel like things are now just flowing. But it's funny, I took time off TikTok. You don't want to take time off TikTok with the algorithm because, boy, let me tell you, it's not pushing my videos anymore, which is really sad. But again, I have to trust the process that maybe it just wasn't my time. I'm back on Instagram and I'm just slowly trying to give some confidence into sharing my personal stuff on there. Kind of like what I said in the beginning of the video, for some reason, sharing my own beliefs, sharing my own thoughts is really scary. And sharing astrology is magical because I've seen it, I've seen the power of it. And it's also an externalized thing from me. But I know that with my Black Moon Lilith there, I am meant to be sharing more about me. So I'll be doing that on this podcast. I'll be doing that on social media. So go follow the Lunar Child Healing on Insta, the Lunar Child on TikTok, and Karma's Calling on YouTube. But the last thing before we close out is all about astrology. And so I just really want to touch on it because there's been some major things happening in the news that we can see astrologically and a lot of things coming. So I want us to just rewind a little bit back to January of 2024, back when Pluto moved into Aquarius. And I did a whole podcast episode on this, and we are seeing it play out live, you guys. So basically, Pluto moved into Aquarius, which is definitely celebrity culture being exposed and falling. And more so for the collective, for all of our individual talents to be more highlighted. So what's been crazy is in the news, right? We had P. Diddy's house get raided. And why this is so important is that's the tip of the iceberg now that we have seen. There are many people in this web, and Homeland Security and the feds would not be raiding someone's house like that if they did not have a lot of information. And I recently watched, I think it's the downfall of P. Diddy on Tube TV. It's free. And it really highlighted how much these celebrities preyed on very young artists, Justin Bieber, Rihanna. They were saying that Rihanna was literally flown here at 14 years old with no adult supervision from Barbados, her homeland, no passport. And she auditioned for P. Diddy in a room at 3 a.m. as a teenager alone. There's just a lot of things around children being exposed and other celebrities being involved, politicians being involved. And I think over the next year, only more is going to come out. So that's been interesting. And then we have Jupiter. Okay, so Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. It's truly around growth and abundance. It wants us to expand our horizons, it wants us to learn and grow our consciousness. And Jupiter was in Taurus for the last year. So it takes a year to get through an entire zodiac sign. And so it takes 12 years to get around the birth chart. So as of May 25th, it's now in Gemini, but it was in Taurus. And before it moved into Gemini, it made a lot of important aspects. Biggest one being it conjuncted, which means it met up right on top of Uranus. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018. And it's going to move into Gemini in 2026. But basically, as it was in Uranus, it wanted to shake up the materialism of this world. Because Taurus rules over money, resources, like the actual money, the actual material items of this world. Now, Jupiter coming to it basically planted a seed. So Jupiter and Uranus conjuncting typically plant seeds that then we don't see. They're going to expand over the next few years to come. So whatever was planted there is going to directly, I feel, impact us in this fall around financial stuff. Obviously we know that interest rates are out of control. We obviously know that the housing crisis is happening on an extreme rate here in America. People can't afford things anymore, right? Well, if you remember to my podcast, Pluto being in Capricorn, in 2008, that's when we had the financial crisis originally. And in astrology, how you predict is patterning. That's how all these planets and these signs have these interpretations, is because people have watched time and time again over these themes through patterning. So if we track it, okay, this is the last time Pluto's going to be in Capricorn. So similar themes are probably going to arise. So we had this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus come May. Uranus is still going to be in Taurus, and Pluto's going to be in Capricorn October and November. So we want to watch what is going to be happening to our financial system. Now, what's interesting is at the same time, celebrity culture is falling. And why I think that's really interesting personally is because we idealize these people. And don't get me wrong, they're super talented, but they are so rich and they are taking so much money. And if they would invest it back into society, we would all live very different lives. And not just celebrities, I think sports athletes as well. My husband and I get in debates about this. He's like, no, they're the best of the best. Like, they deserve $800 million. I'm like, no one deserves almost $1 billion to do a sport. That just blows my mind, right? The discrepancy of people who are in nurses every day saving lives get paid nothing. We need to balance humanity and we need to stop idealizing these people. Should they get paid a lot? Yeah, but that much? It's crazy. And if we shifted that and had less of these idols, and we all realized that we all have our own talents and gifts, and we all valued that together, we could equalize Pluto and Aquarius, the economy, but also society. So I personally believe that's kind of coming. And then Jupiter is now in Gemini. And I think this is really important for us to highlight because Jupiter was in Taurus for the last year, once again, focusing on the material, our wealth, our safety, our finances for the collective. How does that look? How is that changing? Well, now that it's in Gemini, Gemini is an air sign and it's mutable. It means it likes change. It wants us to start learning. Gemini wants us to learn. It's in the intellect sign. It wants us to open our consciousness, okay? And it wants us to connect with one another. The more we can expand, the more that we can learn from each other, the more that we can grow, the more that we are going to evolve. And I think that's what we see with Jupiter trining. It means it's like talking and it's supporting Pluto and Aquarius. That means fast changes are coming for the collective. I think technologically fast changes are coming. And I think we need to be ready to just kind of move with it. I think it's going to be pretty anxiety provoking because air creates anxiety, nerves. But I think whatever's coming is where we're evolving towards, right? I think what's going to happen is more and more people are going to awaken, but more and more people are going to separate because Gemini does create duality. The purpose of it is to realize that duality is an Earth 3D thing, good and bad, black and white. Well, that's not real in a way, but in human consciousness it is, because it all is, if that makes sense, right? That probably doesn't make sense, but basically what I'm trying to say is in the spiritual realm, there's no right or wrong. Everything is pure. But here on earth, things are evil, things are bad, things are good, things are great, whatever, right? We scale it. And Gemini rules over that. And Gemini wants us to realize that all things are, but in the shadow of that is divide and is debate. And I find that to be really interesting because if people are still getting really divided through over the next year, as we know the election is coming in America, and we know financial crisis is looming over us, what is going to happen the year ahead? And why I'm wondering if something is coming is because Jupiter, our belief systems in Gemini, what we're believing is changing, what we're believing is growing, we are learning is, and on an intellectual level as well, science is going to be growing. It is going to square. That means it's going to challenge. It's going to face off in a way with Saturn. And Saturn is society structure, rules. It's how we all are making sure we're driving on the right side of the road and not getting in car accidents all the time. We need Saturn. We need that structure and that constriction. And we need Jupiter. We need this belief so that we can connect with people. But they're going to face off. And Saturn's in Pisces, spirituality. What are people believing in? And how are they following the rules of society based off of that? Right? Because Jupiter and Saturn, they're going to be beliefs are at war with structure and rules and laws. So I think that square come August, I think it's in August, September, I think is going to bring about a lot of tension. And then we move into Pluto being in Capricorn, and then we have the election. So it'll be just really, really fascinating year ahead that, of course, we'll be tracking on here. But we're already seeing Pluto and Aquarius have such a big impact, and we're not even a year into it. Still has to go back to Capricorn. Like, I'm just shook. So we will see what's to come. And again, it's not to fearmonger. It's just to understand that things are changing. And we use astrology to guide us into maybe what's to come, or to guide us in lessons to stay up to date with, to grow in areas of our life. So on an individual level, we all need to be taking responsibility over our spirituality. On an individual level, we need to be learning and growing wherever Gemini is in our chart and expanding in that area. And if you do that, you create abundance into your life. So go to my TikTok, go to my Instagram. You can find out what that means for you as an individual. And if you need a reading to figure out what the heck is happening in your life, as always, I am an astrologer and I do individual one-on-one consultations. So thank you. Thank you for listening to me today. Thank you for being here. I'm going to be having a few people be interviews coming up. Chachi's coming back on the pod. And I'm going to continue to do solo episodes as I move through this journey of pregnancy and what I'm learning. So like, subscribe, favorite, so you don't miss an episode. Send it to your friends. Let's really help me grow this community. And drop some comments on Instagram, guys. Like, I want to know any questions, any topics, as always. So have a great day. Trust the process and let go of control, guys. To get in touch with me, you can head over to thelunarchild.com and book any astrology or therapy sessions. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, The Lunar Child, if you want to dive into daily astrology transits, everything you need to know about your birth chart, and some health and wellness goodies. And I will see you all next time.